This week, we got Chiron going retrograde along with Mercury and the Sun meeting in the sign of Leo. At the same time, Venus is going to make her way into the water sign of Cancer, and she'll go right into a tense conversation with Saturn and Neptune that are still both retrograde in Aries. So facing and healing the wounds that have wounded our sense of self is the theme. And we are all being asked to collectively grow up and into ourselves. But in order to grow, we need to slow down and reflect upon where we have come from so we can figure out where it is we are really trying to go. This is the weekly astrological forecast for July 30th through August 5th, what I am calling Know Thyself energy. All right, so let's get into it. So welcome back to Yappin with the Stars, the show where I talk about life and spirit with the help of the planets, stars, and zodiacs, and a little bit of common sense thrown in there as well. I am your host and guide, Dr. Nicole Rouse, a storyteller who comes from a line of storytellers who weave and tell stories in many different ways. And here I work with astrology and ethnography to explore the stories of what it means for us to be human. Because right now, the present is up for grabs. So who is leading the stories that will bring us into our futures? Now, every Wednesday, we check into the chaos we call society and ask two pressing questions. What's the cosmos showing us this week? And what are we being called to move, create, burn, build, or reflect upon? All right, let's get into it, y'all. Okay, before we get into it, I got a few things I want to talk about in terms of reflection and review. Because I've been doing a lot of this myself lately, especially because of these retrogrades. And Mercury retrograde has been retrograding in fire signs the past 18 months. And so as a water sign, that means water sign rising, that means that it's been dog walking through my money houses, houses 2, 6, and 10. I'm going to talk more about this later in the show. But for me, this last one, especially because I'm a Leo sun and North Node, I've really been feeling it as I've had to reassess what does it mean for me to build something, build a legacy through the things I want to create so that I'm not just reproducing the same things I used to do, which is workaholism and burnout, so that this shit's actually sustainable. So how do I build a life that I'm actually living in? Something I talk about all the time, right? And so what's been coming up for me then is what do I want to create and offer in the public that allows me to still own and have my humanity? And so that's when I realized that I want to finish my books. So right now I'm working on my book, and it's actually turned into 2. And as I get those into shape for publishers, so I'm getting the book proposals together since they're both 2 nonfiction books, I am focusing my work this next quarter on my writing and my astrology, because both of my books in some way, shape, or form engage with astrology and astrological logic. And because of that, I decided that trying to do 1811 things just to quote unquote bring in revenue was actually not sustainable, nor bringing me in the kind of sustainable resources that would allow me to continue to create and build in a way that is humane. So because I'm a storyteller, I've been itching to get my own stories out and words out there. So I've decided just to focus on that this season. All right. So what the hell does this mean and why do you care? Well, come get at you, girl, because my astrology books are open. I am focusing on astrological assessments going forward because I really like them. I like them. I learn a lot from them. All of my assessments are live. I'm not an astrologer that does written reports or pre-recorded sessions. It's just not my style. I have nothing against it, just not my style. I like to work with people, understand where they're coming from, hear their story, and then help them reconstruct new stories based upon what the chart is saying, where they are now, and centering their bodies as a way to invoke and center the self. Okay. And when we have selves, then we can have real collectives, as I've always been saying. We have to reverse the ideas that we have been taught through these kind of colonial reimaginings of societal needs, because to not start with the self means that we easily become sheep for power structures to be. Okay. So that's why I like astrology so much and working with it as a storytelling mechanism. And so as I'm writing, I also get informed by the work I'm doing with others. And so this season, I have a number of different offerings that I am both continuing with and introducing that I want to let y'all know about here. All right. So the first ones that I've been talking about lately have been my Understanding Your Spiritual Gifts and Life Transition graduation readings. Those are still up, and I've been really liking the Understanding Spiritual Gifts reading. I've had a number of folks book that last month, and the stories, the understandings of self, the way that people were realizing they always had these quote unquote gifts, they just now have to believe in them and believing in themselves, has been really cool to work with. So go ahead and check those out if you've been interested in understanding how to work with your body's technology as a way to get into your spiritual gifts, or if you're at a life transition and crossroads and you really do want help and guidance from the cosmos as you step into a new version or a new kind of road for yourself. That one's a good one as well. But I've introduced two new readings that'll be live once this show airs. And the first one is called Parenting Your Child. So I've been kind of playing with this with some folks, some clients who have asked for more personalized readings. And I've been really liking working with kind of first time parents or parents with young kids who really want to understand how they can best parent their child, because how they've been taught parenting by society, from their own families, or whatever it is, doesn't work, right? And I think that is the best way, and that is the first way that we start to disrupt these systems, y'all. We disrupt them in the places in which we are first groomed to buy into a sense of self that is not us, and that is the family, right? So if we can remake family and remake our relationship to one another via the kind of ways that we are birthed into certain bloodlines, well, then we can really reshape and reshift the concept of self and how we come up and into ourselves as we get older. This is about valuing children as actual human beings. Not the other reading I have is called Healing Wombs. Now, this is a Chiron focused reading where we go into your Chiron placement and look at the prescriptions your chart has for how you face that, which has been a core source of wounding for you, usually starting in childhood, that until we face, we end up replicating, right, in one way, shape, or form. And so when we can the chart can also teach us then what it means to alchemize and transmute the wound into healing. And so if you're interested in those readings plus other ones, I've got partner readings, journey to self readings for a natal reading. Go ahead and check out my website, drnicolerouse.com/astrology. And since I am a Leo, an August Leo, and I want to celebrate my birthday all month, I am offering a special discount for folks who do book with me in my birthday month of August. So if you use the code birthday, you get $44 off of any of my readings. That's any of them that I have up because I'm turning 44. So go ahead and check those out. And if there's any questions you have, please reach out to me via my website. Okay. Now, alongside that, I do also want to talk about my Patreon, because there is where I will have more of my writings, especially writing excerpts from the books that I'm engaging with right now, along with my poetry. And there I also am continuing my divination study sessions in which I'm breaking down different divination systems and their logics as a way for folks to be able to understand how to apply it themselves. I also have listening and reading conversations and salons, play dates with curiosity, and a bunch more, okay? And also to help support me being able to do this show weekly while I'm also engaging in the kind of creative process of writing and storytelling, I will also start to put parts of this show on the Patreon exclusive only. So as you know, I go through the kind of overall weekly forecasts, a little bit of Astrology 101 or astrology storytelling, and then I get into yapping. Now, going forward, the kind of more detailed daily kind of breakdown for the week, that'll be available only on the Patreon. I'll just do a general overview for folks who are listening on YouTube and also Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you aren't able to listen on YouTube and you want to listen to it in the car, you can still hear me yapping every week on Apple or Spotify, okay? And really, this is just to ensure that I am getting back what I am giving out. And so tiers start as low as $5 a month. So if you're interested in hearing all the episodes and also getting a bit more from me in terms of writing, in terms of behind the scenes of kind of what I'm creating, having be able to beta test some of the projects and programs that I am working on, consider joining my Patreon, y'all. And as the tiers go up in price, you just get more engagement with me as well. Okay. And so finally, if you were interested in learning with me, don't forget that I have my next online seminar August 14th. It's 7 p.m. Central Standard Time online. It's recorded, called Death and the Ancestors, Working with Pluto. So I'm bringing Pluto into this conversation because of where Pluto is right now in Aquarius. And since the Lord of the Underworld is with the collective, we are really being asked to go through a death and rebirth process, both as a collective or collectives living, but also there's an ushering in of the collective dead. So then what does it mean to work with this energy of death and transformation in a time of continued dehumanization, when we're being asked and really need to sit in our humanity even more so now than ever? We're going to get into that by breaking down who Pluto is, what death is, the different aspects of death, and then who the ancestors are, and how we work with all of that by engaging in what I call a death ritual. So if you can't make it, but you still want to be a part of it, there will be a recording. You get a zine and instructions on how to construct, again, your own ritual, working with your Pluto sign in particular. No prior experience with astrology or ancestor work is needed. Just got to show up and be curious. Okay, y'all? All right. Now, if you can sign up for that on my website, drnicolerouse.com. Spaces are limited. I only have 20 folks max in my session. So if you're interested, please go ahead and sign up soon. All right, y'all. Now let's get into this weekly forecast, because as I was doing a lot of review of my offerings and what I do for y'all, this is also the energy that we are in currently. A lot of reflection and review, because we are knee deep in retrograde season. Okay. Now, when we take a look at this week's forecast, right, we're having this kind of ongoing conversation about the sense of self, right? How we show up for ourselves, and therefore how that influences and impacts how we show up for others, and what it means to have to defend what we know to be right for us individually and collectively. Okay. Now, I say all of that because of the retrogrades we are in and where they are located, along with this kind of kite formation that is starting to form in the sky between the outer planets, Saturn, and then Mars entering into the mix, right? What we're seeing then is we're being asked to grow up collectively by believing the realities that we are in, okay? And we have to grow up when we face ourselves, our health, and the ways we communicate our actions and needs that we need to take in order to have action that is actually for all of us. And so, talking about strategy, right? Talking about doing things differently, let's get into some astrology storytelling this week instead of a 101, because we're in retrograde season, right? And I wanted to kind of talk through some of the retrograde lessons I've been learning this time round, especially because, like I said earlier, Mercury retrogrades the past 18 months have been in fire signs. And as a water rising sign, so this is any water rising sign, this has been impacting our money houses. So houses 2, second house being the house of value and worth, self-value, how we feed ourselves, how we make money. The 6th house of health, labor, right? Everyday routines, what it means for us to have to labor for life. And then the 10th house of legacy, right? We talk about career in the modern era, but it's really about legacy and the kind of most outward facing aspects of ourselves in the public. Now, the reflection I've been doing has really been about not just what I want to do for my money, but also how I want my body to feel, right? The first iteration of my business was a lot of consulting, which made sense at the time. My work was pigeonholed for a long time when I was in higher ed into DEI, because I examined the concept of the human via the understanding of race and nation and citizenship. Now, because of that, I got told that I did DEI. I said, okay, whatever. And so I did DEI my way for a while, right? Back in the mid 2010s, I wrote about doing anti diversity work actually, because I was not interested in numbers and representation. I wanted to crack foundations of institutions and remake its floors, right? I truly believe that if we could just do those spaces differently, that those spaces could be useful. But then I had to accept the fact over the years that many of these institutions do not want to change. And those inside want to be at the seat of power. They don't want to flip the damn table over, right? That's why I left. But when I left higher ed, my business was really focused on coaching and working with various departments and offices and divisions that were doing change and culture work, right? That was my way of kind of not doing DEI work, but engaging in DEI again my way. Now, this was also the beginnings of my embodied strategic dreaming methodology that I'm working with now. And I'll be honest, I found it frustrating. I didn't want to convince people to be in the room with me or feel forced to be there to fulfill some kind of work checklist or obligation, right? When people are forced to be in spaces they don't want to be in, it can suffocate the space and it becomes really unimaginative and boring while also being violent to the bodies that are leading these sessions. And I knew that work, again, doing it in higher ed and various kind of governmental spaces. Like, I don't want to keep taking the bodily hits because people's uncomfortability. So when my contract started to dry up around last fall in anticipation for the election in the US, I knew I needed to pivot. And so that is what I've been doing, right? As I'm figuring out what exactly this thing called life is. And what's been happening the past 18 months with these fucking retrogrades is like, I feel like every time I get a little bit of groundwork, right? I got some momentum. I'm thinking, okay, this is the direction I want to go in. And some things pick up. It's like every time a retrograde comes, it rocks it, right? It's like the momentum stops, something happens, and shit comes to a crashing halt, right? And then I'm facing a low bank account once again and having to bank on myself and vision even more, right? And I'm realizing that shit's exhausting, if I'm being honest. It really is exhausting because of this constant back and forth game. But you know what I'm realizing, y'all? What's been more exhausting is always being in figuring it out mode. I was talking to my roommate and friend about this the other day because he was really honest. He was like, Nicole, what if you just stop trying to figure it all out? And I looked at him and I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, I literally was like, that sounds great. That makes sense. But I don't know how not to be in figuring it out mode. Okay. With Saturn and Neptune retrograde in my sixth house of Aries, and now Chiron also retrograding in that same house, but at a later degree, right? And then Mercury in Leo retrograding and Pluto in Aquarius retrograding, like, and it is all over my South Node in the goddamn fourth house, right? I feel like I am being forced to stop and review all the shit I have done the past few years and get clear on what direction I want to go in that will benefit my health and create the home and family that I've always wanted, right? Which means that I have to the figuring it out has to stop. So, that's what I'm trying to figure out is how to stop figuring it out. And how I stop figuring it out is letting my body lead. And it really becomes that simple, but it's also the hardest thing to do, y'all, because we are so taught to always be in production mode. That is something that I've really been sitting with a lot is this ways that many of us, especially if you're a millennial, older millennial, young Gen X, right? The way we've been taught and conditioned to always be moving. And then if we're not doing something, if we're not moving, if we're not cleaning, if we're not engaging in something, right? If we just sit with ourselves, then somehow we're a problem. And we're realizing that that's the problem because our bodies can't handle it. Chiron and Aries is really showing us the ways that our bodies are finite. We are not machines. There are things that we fucking need. So can we allow those things that we need to be centered, to be in the forefront, so that we can then figure out how we construct societies that have our needs truly being met, okay? And so this is why I decided to work on my stories and storytelling. It's healthier for my body and it allows me to get out of figuring it out mode and just getting into play. Right? The rise of the cultural worker is here. I've been talking about this a lot. Neptune moving into Aries, the cultural worker is emerging from the deep water. So we're going to get new leaders, new movements, new understandings of society and the structures that support it, which will evolve around stories we tell, right? And I'll be honest, I want to be a part of those new cultural workers. A lot, and I think a lot of us need to be, especially if we are in our 40s and 50s. We need to tell the stories of what it means to age and how, in that aging, you don't ever stop growing. It isn't like the rites of passage stop at 18 and 21. There's continual rites of passage that we have to resurrect, but the only way we can do that is if we start to live and reflect upon the living, talk about it, and then grow. Right? This is also the rise of the new elders. And if we're going to be new elders in order to become ancestors, then the only way we can do that is facing the self. This is what Chiron and Aries to me is really overall showing all of us. And for me, as I review my own life, it's really becoming evident, right? We really have to, how do I say this? If we don't own our own vessel, something else will. And we already know what it looks like, feels like, smells like, tastes like, to have the state come into our bodies and dictate what and who our bodies can do. And now our kids are going to feel that once again as they've pulled back gender affirming care. So now they're going to have a wounding of self. There's going to be another round of a generation of wounding of self if we do not take the self back, if we do not take the human back, if we do not understand that these retrogrades are having us review and reflect upon the fact that the shit that we have been told doesn't make any goddamn sense. Doesn't make any logical sense, y'all. The logic don't logic, then why are we logically aligning with it? Right? So there's a way that these kind of slowdowns, these kind of reviews, these kind of literally walking back through fire as a way to figure out what it means to breathe, to get our air, is needed. And the lessons here will be long lasting. So what lessons has this retrograde cycle been bringing up for you? Right? Really reflect upon not just the past couple of months, but also the past 18 months in your fire houses. Okay. So what is fire? Sagittarius, Leo, and Aries. Look to see what houses those signs rule, and then review and reflect upon what Mercury has been trying to get you to understand, right, about yourself and the ways you work with your fire, because that is going to directly impact how we collectively work with this new air. Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus, and Gemini, right? So this grand trine is forming between the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Saturn. Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. Okay. But as two of those three planets are going retrograde, and Uranus will go retrograde a little bit later this year, there is a way that it's not about just blindly doing something, right? Just being productive. We have to strategize and come back into a sense of our feet first, so that whatever we're creating next actually makes sense. Now, this also brings me into my yapping time, y'all, this session. Now, something else has been coming up this retrograde. Now, something else has been coming up this retrograde season, y'all, and I really want us to pay attention to this and also believe this shit. We are seeing just how much institutions are cowards, and we have to believe them, okay? That is evident all over the place how cowardly but violent these institutions are, especially the ones that claim to be pushing back against the state, but have actually bent the knee as a way to uphold that state and save themselves. And I'm talking specifically about higher education and Columbia University, okay? When we're talking about this idea of Neptune and Saturn retrograde, we're going to see institutions showing their ass, along with Pluto and Aquarius. This grand trine is going to grandly reveal the ways that these institutions for the collective, the stories that underpin them, and the logics that align, that have given them validity, aren't actually working, right? But they're going to keep showing and telling us the stories that they want us to believe, no matter how ridiculous they sound. So we have to believe our oppressor right now, y'all. These retrogrades are having us have to learn and sit in the self, find our hearts, so that we understand our own voices and we can communicate out that which we do not like, that which we want to have change for us individually and collectively. Okay. So what do I mean by Columbia University? Well, Columbia University just agreed to pay the federal government $220 million over the next 3 years, along with a couple of more fines. And they also agreed to ensure that they would monitor that there would be no DEI programming at all. And that students who participated in or were engaged with pro-Palestinian protests could could have their degrees revoked. And this is all in the name of academic freedom. That university president fixed her mouth to say on national TV that all of this was for academic freedom. With a straight face, y'all. You just bent the knee to the state. You just let the Department of Education that has been decimated by a woman who has no qualifications. Literally, Linda McMahon has no qualifications to be leading this department. You let her WWE your ass. She just chokeholds you and you tap the fuck out and you call that freedom. Do we believe the monsters that are knocking at the door that have been trying to show themselves to somehow be our saviors? Can we see the mask slipping? Can we see the emperor has no clothes, but he is still trying to sell you his next collection? It is she by Sheree. Child, all the fashions, but yet there's no fashion, right? That's literally this energy. So do we believe? And if we do, then what happens next? What actions do we take? Right? When this is considered academic freedom by censorship, by ensuring the principles that you as a university stood upon. Remember, Columbia is a university that likes to talk about its past of student protests. Some of the first student protests of the 60s, right, from Black students was on Columbia University. They have a whole kind of arm and a history of leading in these new disciplines. Yet here we go. Once the state comes in and says and demands fealty, says that it will revoke your money, it uses what it has, its money, its resources, right? Then we see just how committed these institutions are to so-called academic freedoms. They're committed to their freedom making and taking. And of course they are, y'all. The university system in the United States, especially the Ivies, was built upon the plantation economy. It predates the United States as a nation state. It legitimated the state itself. It was the university system as being one of the main institutions that gave the U.S. validity to construct itself as a state. All right? Education as an institution does matter for the construction of the modern Western nation state. Always has and always will be. But do we like this shit? Do we like the state as it is? Is it actually giving us what it said it will do? No, it hasn't. So do we believe? At the same time, we are seeing the ways that other universities are going to also kowtow. Harvard's already talking about paying the fucking fine. I bet you other universities will as well. Why? Because they're cowards. They are cowards. They talk about radicalism and have all these so-called innovations, yet you cannot innovate too much because it must be what peer-reviewed and your peers are beholden to and constructed through that same kind of disciplining. Discipline's discipline, and we are seeing the logic of the Western knowledge production and its offspring, which is the nation state and its sense of justice and ideas of innovation and humanity, aren't actually allowing us to be human or innovative, but it is leading us much further into a dystopian future. Exactly what the kind of imaginations of entertainment and even industry and the like have been feeding us for decades now. So do we believe? And if we do, then what happens? What actions do we take? Now we also have these conversations about the HBCUs and Howard. And Howard now giving students all of these big ass bills, not accepting scholarship, not really communicating. And I'm gonna tell you something right now, y'all. Howard's always been like this, just as every other university has. This is not new. This is not new. There has been ways. I used to work, when I worked at Beloit College, my office was contacted by the first gen office over at Howard, low income. There was a brand new office. I'm not even sure if it's still there anymore. And they were looking for support and help. A lot of the work that my office had been doing was getting around to other kind of offices and centers that worked with student populations at the margins. Now at Howard, what they were dealing with was a lack of understanding of first gen and low income students. Right. So they were having issues with the accounting office, issues with having students' financial packages actually being accurate, right? Getting their students into student work that would allow them to be able to pay off some of their bill. And these were really common issues that we had come across when I was working at Beloit and other institutions as well. Because these structures and systems are archaic in nature and they don't have any logical sense. So you're relying upon usually either someone that's been there for, not even joking, 40 years. So you're always going to somebody's knowing of something. And if it's out, and if you need to update these systems because it's based upon this kind of cultural knowing, there's a lot of resistance to change. Right. So we see this a lot in institutions. There's a resistance to change, even as the institution says it wants to change, because the definition of change is just a little tweak. Right. It's just let me put a black or brown face or a woman instead of a man representing it, but do the same thing. This is why representation will never get us liberation, because representation in a plantation requires you to replicate, requires you to become the new overseer, overseeing the interests of that institution. Saturn, Neptune, retrograde Aries going into Pisces. It's time to write new stories by constructing new institutions. In a conversation with Uranus and Gemini, we need to construct and create new geniuses. We need to use our genius. We need to invoke a different way of being, because why? The collective needs to go through a death and rebirth. Pluto and Aquarius. We are in a time in which we have to take responsibility for our lives, y'all. And when I say that, that is not about placing blame. It's not about saying, putting things into a hierarchy, right? We got to break the hierarchy by breaking the rigid binary, which then means we are breaking our attachments to structures and systems that have already shown us they do not like us, are cowards, and will kowtow the minute the state says, step and fetch. Do we believe? Know thyself so you know thy enemy, so you can believe thy enemy and move accordingly. We also are seeing the cowardness of other institutions as well in the US right now, ICE being one of them. That's another one, right? ICE agents and usually having their face covered, storming into places like immigration court to take people away. They are in court doing due process, yet here comes ICE agents yelling and screaming, making a big commotion, showing how big their guns are, right? Showing how big their power is, but yet are too fucking cowardly to show their face. And now we're seeing reports about ICE agents saying they're depressed, not because they are stealing people, not because they are kidnapping folks, not because they are basically the tools and agents of an authoritarian state, but because people don't like them. So they feel beholden, or they feel some kind of way about that. They're going through a depression because you're a coward. Because you're a coward. You're a coward when you put money above your own humanity. All money ain't good money. I don't care how much they're paying. I don't care how much of a bonus it is. Can you sleep at night? Can you look at your neighbor? Do you even have neighbors anymore? Or are you now the new surveillance technique so now neighbors don't come outside, which is now reconstricting the whole damn even local environment, because once vibrant locations of culture and music and dance and laughter and disengagement are now fucking dead. Why? Because people are too afraid to go outside in certain areas, especially in certain parts of the city in which there are high immigrant populations, whether it be Latino or other populations, y'all, because it's not just Latino getting rounded up. There are reports of Brits, of Haitians especially. This impacts everybody. But these institutions are cowards. Just like the rest of these Western nation states are cowards. Because now France has finally acknowledged Palestine as an independent, as an actual state in the UN, joining a list of 130 plus nations around the world that have recognized Palestine as a nation. Wow, France, way to do that when they are literally in the last phases of an absolute famine genocide. That is nothing more than a performance. You are performing. Half of even the US, when it was talking about, the actions of Netanyahu in Israel and how they really aren't that great, it's a performance. You don't care. You are waiting for it to not be able to come back. And then you step up to the plate to perform this idea of somehow moral superiority. None of these nation states are shit, y'all. Do we believe? Hell, even in El Salvador. So they're sending immigrants to that goddamn concentration camp in El Salvador, and now Venezuela is trying to say that El Salvador has human rights violations because Venezuelan citizens were then sent back to them after having to go through El Salvador, and they were completely tortured. Yet Venezuela is doing the exact same thing to prisoners that they have now have in captivity. None of these places are shit. They're all cowards. They're all trying to maintain their authoritarian hold by blaming another authoritarian as somehow worse. Do we believe? The Grand Trine, again, is telling us that society is shifting, and it can go very easily into an authoritarian hellhole across the world if we are not careful, and it already is right now, right? The UK just put into law a new censorship act couched as protecting the children, but really it's a way to ensure that they have everyone's IDs who are going into certain platforms so that they can surveillance you. And guess who was warning us about this for years, y'all? For years. Sex work advocates, sex workers, those who are involved in these industries that are always used as some kind of demonization for a supposed societal moral high ground when society is immoral to begin with because we won't fucking feed kids and families have to figure it out even as they are forced to have children that they cannot afford. Do we believe? It's not just the US, y'all. We ain't shit. Okay, we are not shit. And we like not being shit the best. Okay. Everything's bigger and better in the US, right? Like they talk about Texas. But in reality, what we are seeing is an unveiling of how the institution of the nation state, the modern nation state, does not work. It doesn't. It was built upon a house of cards, built upon a lie, built upon the subjugation of others around the globe, built upon a reconstruction and reconscription of the human, of living in life through the lens of a colonial project that themselves were trying to figure out how to live and escape their hellhole that they created through that monarchy. So the loops are getting tighter and we have to break them. So do we believe that these institutions are cowards and they will always move the floor? They will always tell us a story that is so illogical, but because they are so good at convincing, they make the illogic logic so that your logic then becomes illogical. This is why you got to turn your body on, y'all. The body's technology. Technology that can tell you, that can give you the confidence to be like, you might be telling me, my mind might be saying, yes, my body is saying, ain't no goddamn way. So what are we going to do next? Okay. Because if we don't, then we are choosing cruelty as our future. If we do not take responsibility for our lives and come into ourselves and understand the needs that we must have in order to then create collectives, create communities in which we can care for one another as a resistance via true love as fire to this cruelty of an authoritarian state, if we can't do that, then we are choosing cruelty. And I do mean that, y'all. We are choosing cruelty. We have a choice. What do we choose? Chiron and Aries retrograde, Saturn and Neptune as well, retrograde in the sign of the self. Reflect and review and take this shit back. Mars and Virgo, release the logics that don't make any sense. Get into the body and turn it on, because when Mars goes into Libra, we have to have different strategies. We have to have different strategies. Meeting fire with fire is only going to lead to more fire, especially when you have not been trained to even work with your fire. So therefore, only fire we know how to create is one that we still do give up. Different ways of being, y'all. And it requires an understanding of care, an understanding of mothering and motherhood, and an understanding then of what it takes to care for and mother those creations. Because again, if we are being promised the rise of an AI future in which they are literally birthing new creations, this is birthing new life, new consciousness, even though it is still through the lens and the eyes of its creator. If the creator themselves have been so removed from their humanity to the point that they think empathy is somehow a problem for the human, then what the fuck is those creations going to actually then create? What will come out of those out of excuse me, what will come out of children who are left feral? who are fed nothing but this kind of doom and gloom and then left to their own devices. We already know what that looks like, y'all. We do it to our own kids here, right? That's why I get sick and tired of people always invoking children as the excuse of why you want to continue to stifle and regulate the human. The UK use children as to why you want a surveillance. You don't even like kids. You don't even give a good goddamn about kids. You're trying to privatize your healthcare system, right? That previously saved the life of your former prime minister's kid. Okay, there are all these different y'all have elected over and over again conservative prime ministers who have done nothing more than close your borders and more, right? Heat is so damn high, but yet there's no way to cool it. We are the children. The US is the child of that nation state, of that former empire. So everything the UK has done, we do now. But we just do it better, y'all. So they censor, we do it better. They reconscribe their citizenship laws. So what they're doing now in the US, y'all, with this idea of birthright citizenship that is now being challenged once again in the court, is what the Trump administration wants to do is say that unless you are born here and your parents are born here, you no longer are a citizen. Now, many countries do have that as their citizenship laws. Germany is one of them. We are a country that, excuse me, we are a country that practices citizenship through blood and through birth. Okay, which means that if you are born on this country's land or territory that is U.S. that is U.S. designated, you are a U.S. citizen. Now, Trump is saying no, you have to be by birth. All of that is nothing more than a eugenics, white supremacist dog whistle because they're trying to kind of increase the number of people who are considered white in the U.S. over time. Since it's projected that by 2040 or 45, the majority of people in the United States will be folks of color, not white folks, okay? So it's nothing more than kind of this replacement theory put into action. The UK did this shit first, y'all. When they're with their Windrush generation scandal that happened during 2014, started in 2014 on Theresa May. All of a sudden they were using citizens to surveil other citizens because they were revoking social services for those who they considered to not be quote unquote legitimate, rightfully aboded folks. And so then what they were trying to do is force people to prove their citizenship. Now, a lot of folks who came during the Windrush generation came on these kind of landing cards that were physical cards put into the home office, okay? Put into the home office office itself, this building. They disappeared. They disappeared. People couldn't prove that people who had been their whole fucking lives could not prove they were British citizens because of this law, even as the state knew that they were responsible for not having the evidence for certain populations. And since most of those folks were not white, they didn't give a fuck and they were shipping people off. They were shipping people off to Jamaica, never been there, and other parts of the world. And they justified it. And then she became prime minister. We are the child of the British Empire. And because the US is so young and arrogant, it's that Aries energy, right? A bit. We'll just do it bigger and better. So instead of just targeting folks that way, we'll just make it so that birthright citizenship now becomes law. And we're going to round folks up in a cowardly fucking way and ship them off because we can't acknowledge the fact that the future of this country is not a white one. It's not sustainable. It never was. Do we believe? Do we believe? And if we do, what do we do next, y'all? What is the actions we take individually and collectively? Okay? All right. Let me stop there. There was a lot to chew on, okay? There was a lot to chew on. There's a lot going on. This week, what I would like y'all, I really recommend to do, okay? What I really recommend to do is track your emotions. Track your emotions, y'all. Track how your body is feeling. You can do it on your voice. You can voice note it. You can write it down, right, on your notes app or on a journal or something. But track your emotions and see what becomes illuminated for you. Okay? What becomes illuminated when you allow the biggest emotion that you're trying to suppress to sit at the table with you and actually speak to you? Because a lot of the times the emotions that we try to suppress, the biggest ones that we try to stuff down, is actually our higher self trying to talk to us via the body, right? The body is the technology. The body has to be turned on. Virgo, Mars, South Node, okay? Venus, Gemini. So how do we talk to ourselves and communicate about what it is we need and want? And as these outer planets are asking us to reconscribe, right, our knowledge, our knowing, our understanding of community, and who and what we pour into, and then the sense of self that is needed in order to sustain those communities and that knowing, then this is a time in which we have to take the review that is given to us by the cosmos and retell our own stories with the universe, co-creating with the energies that are here. So this is why, to me, astrology becomes a really great tool we can engage with and use to tell new stories at these crossroad times. Okay, so track your emotions, y'all. If you want, please let me know what comes up, either on the comments on YouTube or Spotify, Apple, or if you're on my Patreon, there as well. And if you're on the Patreon, next month in August, for my birthday month, we're going to be doing a special salon convo in which I'll be talking more about how we tell our own stories by working with our fire. Okay, so join me on Patreon for that. Now, next week we got Mars going into Libra, and I'm going to talk a lot about that because it's going to be opposing Saturn, because I want us to rethink what strategy means and looks like via the idea of compromise and collaboration once we bring an understanding of love as fire into that equation. And then Mercury will be going to direct, and we get a full moon in Aquarius. So like I said, y'all, the beginning of August, a lot of shit's going on. So we're going to keep tracking it. All right. Please subscribe to my Patreon at the Groundscape level. It's only $5 a month. And there you will have access to all episodes along with more writing from me, show notes that I don't get to because I'd be writing all kinds of things and much more. Okay. And as always, keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through the dreamscapes that we can bring the future that we want to in the present. Until next time. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang. The Thyself, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night, when they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang, the cosmos. The cosmos. We'll learn, imagine that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth's seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters. Our connection to earth and land. As above, so below. Yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free and journey to the cosmos.